Hi, and welcome to our part 5 of creating an image gallery app. We'll start by doing a short recap of what we did on our previous video. So on our previous video, we actually managed to display our images. That meant loading the data from our database and using that data, which was our path, actually load it and display it to our frames, our screen. So let me run this. We were able to create a scrollable frame, also display the multiple images on our computers. So on today's video, we'll be going to the next part, which is displaying our images on a single frame, simulating where a user clicks on an image. So you want to display only one image on the frame and maybe make some adjustments, some editing, such as allowing the user to crop and maybe even flip the image. But before we do that, you've actually noticed that our images are actually squeezed. No space in between them in the rows. You need to change that before proceeding. So I'll give it not a border, I'll give it a space of 4 pixels, similar to the space in between the rows. And to change this, I want you to go to your load image function inside your main file, main.py file. And yes, just before our function ends, there's somewhere where we added our x to the width. We need to add a +4. This part 4 +4 represents the space in between. And also when calculating the remaining width, we also need to remove that 4. Tell our program that we have left a border of 4. Now if we run this again, yes, you can actually notice that there's a space in between our images. We're done with that. So we'll go ahead and create another file and call it image tools. This will handle all the image editing tools, which include the cropping and the flipping. So I want to do this on a separate file, so go ahead and create another file and call it imagetools.py. It's already opened, so we'll obviously need custom tikinter, so I'll go ahead and import it from custom import. So I'll create a class. Remember, as a best practice, I'll call my class a name similar to the name of the file, which is image tools. This is actually a best practice. And we'll start by defining our init function. So inside our init function, we need to create a frame. So I'll call myself.imageFrame. So it's a frame, so it'll take a ctk frame. Okay, so it obviously needs a master, and since we haven't defined one, we'll specify it as an attribute here inside our init function, so that whenever our user will be initializing this, we'll have to include the master. By master, we refer to the container that will be holding this frame. So I'll add it here, master. Then we want to give it some dimensions. I'll give it a width and height similar to our app, which was 850 by 450. 850 and a height of 450. And I'll also give it a background color similar to our overall app. Let me check that since I don't remember the color. Yes, here it is. So aside from the color, you'll also declare that it takes a corner radius of 0. Okay, so after creating our frame, we won't immediately display it. we'll display it at another time. So we'll inside this frame, we'll actually be creating a couple of other widgets, which include two buttons. No, not two buttons, three buttons. Two buttons with arrow to represent the right arrow and left arrow for changing in between images. That button will be a back button. So for this button, it will be used to going back to the previous frame to it used to close the frame. Yes. Let's go ahead. So I'll start with the left button. Let me just call it left. It's obviously a CTK button. And for this button, we won't be adding any text. We'll be using some icons. Let me declare my master as the self.image frame. I'll give it a width and height of 20 by 50. For the background color, I want to retain this color, but we'll also add a hover color so that whenever we hover on these buttons, it change. So for a hover color, I'll give it the color similar to our menu bar that we declared inside our main file. We just copy that. And it will also take the corner radius. But in this case, the corner radius will be 5. Let me change that. And we need to tell it that the text is blank. Do it here. Text blank. And I need to load the icons that I'm using. So let me create a variable cell.l. This is actually for the icons I'll be using on those buttons. So to add an icon, you need to use the CTK image to text two values, file itself and the dimensions. But to open our image and make it readable to our program, we need to import image from Pillow. We'll go ahead and write from PIL import image. So our file, need to first open it, image dot open. This takes the path to our file, which is in my case icons slash, call it right arrow / arrow. Don't forget the extension name, in my case.png. So to get this image, just go in the description below. There's a link to all these icons. So I'll have the left arrow and the right arrow. I've already downloaded them. It's only loading them. And I'll change this to left. So after declaring my text as a blank, I'll go ahead and assign my image. And this is the left button, so it will be self.l. And finally, I'll place it self.left.place. But to place it, I'll obviously place it at 5. And for the Y, I'll place it at 200. I'm using 200 to place it at the center of our height, which is at 200. And I'll copy and paste this, create a replica but for the right image, for the right button. Change this variable right. what else am I changing? Yes, the icons, self.r, then the dimensions. Y coordinate maybe 815. I'll give it 850. So I'll also create the back button, but I'll place it up. So self dot back. So obviously a button CTK button, but for this button we won't actually be using an icon, we'll just be using the text. I haven't downloaded a suitable icon. So I'll declare the master self.image. I'll give it maybe a width of 150 and a height of 30. I'll also declare the text. Text will be back. Also declare the font, which is obviously Times. And for the font size, I'll give it 16. What else? Yes, for the border radius, it will be 5. Not border radius, corner radius. 5. I also need to give it a background color. I'll declare a background color and also a hover color. So FG, I'll give it the color similar to our menu bar, and also for the hover color, I'll do the same. Meaning that whenever we hover, the color won't change. And to place it, I'll place it at 5 for the X and Y coordinates. Okay, so let's go ahead and create another function that will make this frame visible. I'll call mine place. So what this will do is it will make our frame visible for self image frame. But before making it visible, it needs to adjust it such that it's at the topmost. Then self dot image frame dot place. Since our image frame was similar to the whole window, we'll place it at 0. So x is equal to 0. Y will also be 0. And I guess we are done. But for the place, we'll be binding it to our buttons, meaning that it will be an event. So we'll have to declare an event here. Let's go back to our file. First, we need to import that file. So from image tools, import image tools. So for the first name, remember this represents the first name represents the file name, whereas the second name represents the class inside that file. So I'll come here and create a variable I'll call my tools and assign it to that, to image tool. it takes a master, so our master will be the self dot app. So this is initialized, so we need to make it visible. How do we do this? I'll go to where we loaded our image and bind an event. So go to the load function inside the main file, and right after where the image frame is placed, you need to bind an event. So self dot img frame bind. So the bind takes two values, the event type, then the function. For event type, it will be a button one. If you go to Kinta's documentation, you'll see all the events. So a button one simply means a click. Whenever you're clicking something or tapping it using the mouse pad, this is a click. And so for function, it will be the place function. But since this is an event, you need to create a lambda event. Then we'll call our variable that we use to initialize our image tools, self.tools dot place. Let's see, it takes an event, so I'll go ahead and write my event. So let's run this. There's actually something wrong. Let me check that. Oh, here the y inside the right, this should be 200, whereas the x should be 815. And also for our back button, we'll have to change this to 120. The button was too big. So go ahead and run our image file. Looks like our buttons are our images are inverted. So for the right button, it needs to end by maybe 5. Okay, let's change. Here's the issue. So this should be left, should be right, then should be 810. Let's run it for the last time. Not exactly the last time. You can actually see we have our back button here. We have our other buttons here, which we'll use to change in between images. So the next part will actually be displaying this image we tapped on, and after doing that, we'll actually try cropping it. So let's go back to the code. We'll have to assign this to a we'll have to make our back button hide this frame. So let me show you how we'll do that. So go back to your back and write your command. Say the command create a lambda, or write the word lambda and a colon. Then write the self dot image frame dot place. forget. That should hide our frame. So next, as I told you, we need to create our canvas. Our canvas will help us draw shapes and play an image. So let's go ahead. So self dot canvas. I'll call it canvas with a small c. Then to create our canvas, we need a ctk canvas. It obviously starts by taking the frame self dot image frame. Obviously, it will also take the width. So for the width, we could maybe give it 760. For the height, we could give it, so overall height is 450. We want to leave a gap of 50 at the top. We'll give it 395. 395. What else? Okay. So I'll also give it a background of white. The reason why this is not the ultimate background, but by giving it a background of white, I'll be able to determine whether I need to move it or make it smaller. And also I need to remove the border on its side. So to remove this, I need to write a highlight thickness equal to 0. Thickness. So this tells our program that our canvas will have a border of 0, meaning that it won't have any border. And now finally need to place it. So self dot canvas dot place. So the X will place it at maybe 35. Is okay. Place it at 45. And for Y, place it at 50. Let's see how it looks. Nice. Let me check whether it abstracts any of this. So this is actually nice. I think this button should still be smaller than this. I'll change it to 100. So I'll change its background to this other background. Then see how we display our images. So for the back, I'll still trim it to 100. And you also need to change the background. So I want it to have a background similar to the overall frame. So I'll go ahead and create. So if I do what I want to do, since we want to display an image, we obviously need the path of the image. So in our place function, we need to tell our program that we also need to take a path. And after we have taken a path, let's create another function. We call it display image. Image. And it obviously take the path. So to display our image, we'll need, obviously, we'll create a variable self.img equal to image.open. This makes our image readable to our program. So this takes a string, which is our path. This. So after doing that, now need to create another variable and call it image. You can note the first one was img, whereas the second one is image. And for this, in Linden, we'll also need to import something else from Tkinter, image tk, which makes it visible to display those images for programs tk. So instead of self.image variable, we'll need to image tk dot photo image, and this takes the image that we just opened, so self.img. Now our image is ready to display. But how to display it inside our canvas? It won't be as we normally do. So in our canvas, we'll have to reference our canvas, self.canvas.create. As you can see from this list that is being displayed, you can actually use our canvas to create many things, from drawing shapes to images and bitmaps. But in our case, we'll be using the image. So our image will be taking 3 values. The first one will be the x coordinate, the second one the y coordinate, and finally our image. But for the x and y coordinate, it will be taking the midpoint. So what's the midpoint of our canvas? As per the width, we'll always start with the width. The midpoint of our width is 760 divided by 2, which is 380. Whereas for our height, it's actually a bit difficult. Let me just change this to 390. Make it more easier. For our height, it will be 140. 195. Is it really 195? Yes, 195. And finally, our image. So write image equal to self.image dot image. Now, finally, so we'll call this function right after creating this, right inside our place function. So self dot display image, and it obviously takes the path. So we need to go back and make the adjustments inside our main file. So here we have seen that it also takes our path. So as you can see inside our for loop, in the for I in self.db.images, right there, if you don't have this line of code, go ahead and write it. Write path is equal to I. So this I is our path, since we're loading it from our images. This is the path. Path is equals to I if you haven't done that. Then come back to where we are binding our events, and right after the event, okay, let's first do this. Inside here, inside the place after event, write the path. If we run it as it is, we'll actually note that all images will retain one path, which is the path of the last image. That's why we need to come here and say path is equal to path. This tells our program that each image has its own specific, and so the paths will be shared across the other images. So each image will take its own specific path. And let's run it. Nice. You can actually see it actually displayed our image. But now we have an issue. You can actually see this image is actually smaller. But what if you have an image that's too big? We do. getting like this. Yes, you can actually see that this image is too big, such that we're only seeing the top part. So you need to go back and work on the logical part. So if you check here, our height is 390. So you need to come here after the image. So write to variables width. So we first need to check our width and height. So how do we do this? Create two variables width and height. As I've done, create and add it to our image self dot the image that we just opened, but dot size. So this outputs two values which refer to the width and height, and they are assigned just as you have listed. So we'll go here and write an if statement if our width, not with height, if our height is bigger than 390, so we first need to get the excess height. How we the percentage excess height? How do we do this? I'll create a variable pass the percentage. So I'll have to do the height that we've gotten minus 390, get the excess height. But now after getting this, we need to get the percentage. So the main reason we're getting the percentage is so that we can reduce the other dimension, which is the width, by the same percentage, helping our image retain the same aspect ratio. If you don't understand, you'll actually see that as we continue. So I'll put this inside a bracket. So the excess height divided by the original height. I'll also put this inside our brackets. Then divided by 100. It be divided by 100 or no, times 100. Yes, times 100. Now we've already gotten the percentage. Now we need to change our width. So if our height is bigger than 390, we'll tell our program that since our maximum height is 390, we'll assign our height to 390. But now we need to make the changes on our width. So for our width, we'll have to reduce it using the percentage. So we want to get the remaining percentage when we minus 100 from the percentage that we got here. So I'll do 100 minus our percentage. After minusing this, I'll have to divide it by 100. This now tells us the remaining percentage after you remove the excess. So after getting the remaining percentage, you need to multiply it by our original width. I'll just write width. Okay. So our width will be, yes, so this will be our width. So we've already changed our width and height, but we have already gotten the required width and height after making it smaller. But now we need to resize our image. So how do we do this? So I'll go and reference myself.img is equal to self the same variable, but now the initial value. So you can actually change the variable of you can actually change the value of a variable by referencing the same variables. What do I mean? If you give x a 1, if you assigned a 1 to x, you can actually tell your program that x refers to the previous value of x, which was 1, plus, let's say 1 or 2. It will be x is equals to x plus 1. Meaning you'll tell your program that x is equals to the previous value of our x plus now the value that we're giving, which may be 1 or even 2. In our case, it will be our image will be the previous value of our image, but we resize. So to resize, it will take two values, which will be our width and height. Let me list them. And since our width might be a percentage, no, might be a decimal, I need to tell it that it's an integer, not a decimal. So what else? And then finally, you need to tell it what will the resampling type, the resampling method will be using. So resampling is used to images when performing certain actions such as sizing, a couple of others that you'll actually notice as you do various projects in Python. So to declare resampling, it will be image dot resampling. We'll be using the lang dot lang source, and this should work. So let's go ahead and run it. Obviously it runs this well, but now for a larger image. Nice, you can actually see the difference. Now this image, which was initially so big, is actually better. So this actually worked. This is actually nice. So next we'll work on these buttons so that we are able to use them to move to various images, to and from various images. But we'll actually try displaying something else. Nice, can actually see that. It's actually pretty cool. Let me try displaying something else. Nice, nice. Nice, nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and work on these buttons, which are our right arrow and left arrow. So we'll create another function. I'll call it next. I'll call it next. So the logical part is actually a bit interesting here. So let me explain what you're doing. We're actually supposed to get the path. Then on the path that we had, remember this path is from a list, from a database list. So we need to check that database list and check for the index of this. Then if you're going to the next index, we'll do a +1. If it's the previous, we'll do a -1. So let's do so. But now meaning that we need to declare that list and bring it here. So how do we do this? I'll go ahead and write self dot and not self, the image list, and then we'll have to create a variable here after our images. Then it's called self dot list image list. You note the capital letters is equal to image list, meaning that to initialize our app, we'll have to also declare our image list. So what? Okay. So after we've already gotten our image list, so what we'll do, we have a next and a previous one, and a previous function, a function called previous. So apart from that, we'll also need to create another variable and call it current image, which will store our file. So at first it will be a blank. So we'll be looking for this path inside this list, and there's a way you can actually get the index. After getting the index, we do a +1. If it's the next, a -1. If it's the last one. So I'll start by getting a current index. So for current index, it will be our image list, self dot image list dot image list. So to find the index of an item, you need to reference your list dot index, and inside the index you write the brackets, then the file that you want to change. No, the file that you're looking for, the file whose index you're looking for. So in our case, it will be the self.current_image. .current image. But before we continue, we need to assign our current image. So whenever we display an image, you need to change the value of the current image. So self.current_image will be equal to the path that we just got. Okay, so that's done. So we've already gotten the current index. So get the next image, we'll do this. So our next image will be, remember to get items inside the list, use the index. So I'll reference my list. So self dot image dot image list, then we give it the index. But since we're looking for the next image, it will be our current index +1. So current index +1. Then so this gets the path of our next image. So we display the image. So I'll call the self.display image dot display image. Then I'll give it the next image. Okay, so we need to do the same for the previous function. I'll just copy and paste and make some small tweaks. So our current image, so for the current index, nothing changes since it's get the current index of the current image. But for the next, now this won't be next, it will be previous. I'll just write prev. It will be the current index minus 1. But now we need to write, okay, then before I do that, then it will display the previous image. But we actually need to, there's a catch here. In case our index is actually 0, if we do a -1, the index will be 2, -1, and so that won't be applicable inside our list. So we'll write an if statement and say if the current index is bigger than 0. If it is bigger than 0, it will carry out the following. If it's not bigger than 0, nothing will happen. So this will be right here inside. So, okay. So let's assign this to our functions. So our next and previous will go to where our buttons are, have the left and right. So for our left button, it will be representing our previous. I'll go ahead and write command. So self dot previous. Yes, previous. Don't add the double brackets, just leave it as it is. Then come here for our right, it will be self dot next. But for our next, we also have a catch. If the index is equal to the last index, what should it do? It will go back to our first image. So how do we do this? Go to where our next is, and right here after the current index. So how do we know if the current index is the last image, is the last item? So if our current index so how do we know if it's the last item, is equal to the length of our image list. So self dot image list -1. Yes, so our image list -1 you actually know the difference between the length and the index is actually a 1. So the last index will be the length -1. If it's equal to that, meaning that should be our last index, it should change the value of the next image. So our next image will be 0. So since this is our last image, it should go to the first image, which is 0, and write an else meaning that it's not the last image. We'll carry out this other. So everything's done. So I'll just go back to my main file and give it the list. Let me look for initialize the image tools. Okay, so for our list, it will be the self.db.images. Yes, I hope that's the correct list. Yes, self.db.images, the same as what we used on our image. So let's go ahead and run this. I think I should wait for this to first finish. So we've already displayed our first. So if we press this, nice, nice. What about going back? Nice, nice. Now, this was our first image. So if we do this, you see, nothing happens. So let's go to our last image. This is our last image. If you go forward, it doesn't work. So there's actually a problem with our next. So let's go back to the next. Oh yeah, I've actually seen the issue. This should not be inside the if else. Instead, it should be outside. So this if else only changes the value of the next image variable. So let me run this. Nice, nice. This is actually nice. I like it. So I'm waiting for it to finish loading our last image so that can, yes. So this is our last image. So if we click on this, yes, you actually see it goes back to our first image. So what else could we do? So these three buttons work. So next we'll be creating our tools. We'll create our toolbar here, which will actually enable us to do things such as cropping and flipping mostly. But before I close this up, I'd like to display. Nice, nice. I hope you also enjoy doing such. For me, I enjoy. So what? Nice. So we'll display the toolbar right on this top and add a couple of buttons. So let's go ahead. So right here, right inside this. So I'm thinking of adding 4 tools. The first one will be crop, then maybe the draw tool, then maybe the flip. Yes, by flip, we'll have the horizontal flip and the vertical flip. So let's do so. So since the buttons are 4, I could maybe make a rough estimate of 40 each, meaning if it's 40, you need like 160, a width of 160. So go back to your image tools. And right inside the init function, just before creating our canvas, create another variable and call it toolbar, self.toolbar. So it will be a CTK frame, it will be a frame. So inside this frame, we're obviously placing it inside the self.image frame. Give it a width of 160. And a height of 35. or maybe height of 40. Or for the width, let's just give it 200. 200, meaning that each button, since we have 4 buttons, each button will have a width of 50. So for the background color, we'll give it something similar to our menu bar. I'll just copy from our back button. So FG color. And obviously the corner radius. The corner radius, should we give it 5 or maybe add? I'll give it 6. So let me give it 6. So finally I'll place it self dot the toolbar dot place. So for the X, I want to place it at the center. Now with this 850, so minus 200, 650 divided by 2, 325. So our X will be 325. But for our Y it will be 5. Y is equals to 5. So for the corner radius 6. So after this we'll start creating our buttons. So I'll start with the crop self dot crop. So for this button, I already have our image. With the image, check for the link in the description below. So we are placing this inside the toolbar. So for the width, we said we'll give it 50. And for the height, we'll give it 40. We'll see how this turns out. For the border radius, we'll give it 40. We'll give it a 0. Hope it turns out cool. This will obviously be 0. Finally, we place this. So since this is our first, we'll place it at 0, self.crop. So the X and Y coordinate will be 0. So I'll copy this and I'll copy and paste this 4 times. One, two, three, and the 4th time. So our second button will be flip, but it will be flip horizontally. So I'll call it flip H, flip H, flip H. This one will be flip vertically, so it will be flip V. And finally, this will be draw. So we also have to load our images. This time I'll be loading them according to, let me check something. According to number, so I'll start from 0 to 3. Self.img 0. Obviously a CTK image. We'll repeat what we did here. Looks like we didn't give this some dimensions, but it still works, so I'll leave it as it is. Rule number 1, if the code works, don't touch it. So our number 1 will be the crop, so I'll write crop.png. So for the size, maybe like give it 24 by 24, is that? Or maybe 25 by 5. Let's try 25 by 25. 25 by 25. So 1, 2, 3. So after our crop, we'll load our. I've called mine flip H, flip horizontally, so flip H, and is flip V. Then true. Oh, I called mine pencil. Remember to get these icons. Click the link in the description below. So finally, I'll add them to each button. I'll start with this. So before adding them, you need to tell our program that for the text value, we'll be giving it a blank. Then we'll add our image. This is image 0, self dot img0. I'll repeat this for the other. This will be image 1. Image 2. Finally, image 3. Actually didn't need this. I don't know why I copied it again. Oh, we actually didn't change the dimensions. So we'll be giving each a gap of 50. So our first one was x is equals to 0. Our second one will be 50. Our third 100. So a gap of 50 by 50. Next one 50. Yes. Finally done. So let's do this. Nice. Looks like we'll have to change something. So for one, I don't like this over color. Yes, actually. So we'll have to give our images a hover color similar to its background color. Let me do this. Over color. We'll actually have to make some adjustments to the width for it to have the round edge effect. Or let's just change the have to change the border radius of our first and last image. No, we'll have to take this back by maybe 2. So on a toolbar, go and increase to 4. To 4. That we leave a padding of 2 where the frame starts and where the frame ends. So I'll have to move this by 2. 2. This also by 2. I hope this works. Let me run this again. Yes, the curving is actually happening. You can actually see the borders are a bit smoother than they were initially. I'm actually thinking, should we like add a separator in between to make it look stylish? Or should they just leave it as it is? So I'm not yet satisfied with the rounded edges. So I'll increase this to maybe 7. Let me run this again. I think we should make some changes. Change this to 6. Add a +1 on each. 3, 3, 3. I hope this is the last time we are running this. It's actually better. It's actually better. Nice, nice. I'm thinking if we should actually give it. I think you should add another button here, a save button, which will initially be disabled, but whenever you make any changes, you can actually save. We'll do that. I'm actually making sure that this doesn't overlap. Nice. This looks cool. Okay, so actually thinking of making some changes. I'm thinking of bringing these covers down by 5. That we could maybe add some space here. That we could maybe make this bigger. But I'm wondering whether it's worth it. So let me look at my canvas. Yes, here it is. So for the Y, I'll move it down by 5 to 55. I think it's okay the way it is. So let's go ahead and add our save button right below our back. So where was our back? Okay, it is. Just copy and paste it. But I'll call it save. In case of any changes, I'll update you on the next video. But for this, since we haven't given it any command, and for the X it will be 745. Actually leaving an padding of 5 on the right. Let's run this for the last time. Nice. So we've actually come to the end of this video, our part 5. I'm glad you could watch this and actually put this. I hope to meet you in the next video. So stay tuned. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure that you subscribe and hit on the bell notification so that you get notified whenever I'll be releasing my part 6 of this video. Let's meet in the next video. For the code, there's actually a GitHub repo, the link below. So go ahead and check it out. And if you like the project, leave a star on the project. Okay, so till we meet again, goodbye.